The planet burned below as the Valoran warships completed their work. Great cities that had stood for thousands of years now crumbled into ash. The Andal people, a peaceful species known for their art and music, watched their world die from refugee ships fleeing into the dark of space. But there was nowhere safe to run. The Valoran Dominion had come. And when the Dominion came, everything fell. High Sovereign Orath stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Crown. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and eyes that glowed like dying stars. He had ruled the Dominion for 300 years, and in that time, he had conquered 47 species. Some joined willingly. Most did not. It made no difference to Orath. The result was always the same. The Andal sector is ours, Grand Marshal Sevik reported, bowing his head. All resistance has ended. Otiv enough. Orath did not smile. He never smiled. Good. What lies beyond? Sevik pulled up a holographic map. A small region of space glowed at the edge of their new territory. Terran space. My sovereign. A young species. They call themselves humans. Humans, Orath repeated the word slowly. I have heard this name. They made contact with the wider galaxy perhaps 80 years ago, yes? That is correct. They control approximately 200 star systems. Their technology is basic compared to ours. They have never fought a major war against another species. Orath turned away from the burning planet below. Send an emissary. Tell them their space now belongs to the Dominion. They may surrender peacefully or be destroyed. The choice is theirs, though the outcome will be the same. Sevik hesitated for just a moment. My sovereign, our scouts report that the humans have stationed a fleet at their border. They appear to be waiting. Waiting for what? We do not know. Orath waved his hand dismissively. It does not matter. Send the message. 3 days later, the Valoran diplomatic vessel arrived at the edge of Terran space. Emissary Terran sat in his chamber, preparing the words he had spoken to dozens of species before. The speech was always the same. Surrender your worlds. Join the Dominion. Resistance means death. No species had ever refused. Why would they? The Dominion had 10,000 years of conquest behind them. They had never lost a war. The transmission was sent to Border Station Apex, the main Terran military outpost in the region. Terran expected tears. He expected begging. He expected desperate attempts at negotiation. Admiral Kang Teho read the message in his office, alone. He was 58 years old, with gray hair cut short, and a face marked by decades of service. He had joined the Terran fleet as a young man and worked his way up through discipline and skill. He had never sought glory. He had never wanted fame. He simply believed in one thing. Earth and her colonies must be protected. Always. Teho read the Valoran demands twice. Then he set down his datapad and looked out the window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, a massive empire was telling humanity to kneel. They expected fear. They expected submission. Teho thought about his grandfather, who had survived the century of fire on Earth. The old man had told him stories about the wars that nearly destroyed humanity. Nations fighting nations. Cities turned to glass. Billions dead. But humanity had survived. They had crawled out of the ashes and built something new. Something stronger. We did not survive ourselves to bow to anyone else, his grandfather had said. Teho never forgot those words. He pressed a button on his desk. Connect me to the Valoran vessel. Emissary Terran appeared on screen, his expression calm and superior. Admiral, I trust you have received our terms. The High Sovereign is generous. If you surrender your worlds peacefully, your people will be allowed to live as subjects of the Dominion. You will serve us, but you will survive. Teho looked at the alien for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice flat and steady. The Terran command forbids the Galactic Empire from crossing this border. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. If your ships cross into our space, they will be destroyed. There will be no second warning. Terran blinked. For a moment, he seemed unable to process the words. Admiral, I do not think you understand. The Dominion has conquered species far older and more powerful than yours. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. You cannot stop us. Perhaps, Tejo said. But you will have to come and prove it. He ended the transmission. Terran sat in his chamber, staring at the blank screen. In all his years as an emissary, no one had ever simply refused. There had been threats before, yes, desperate last stands and empty words of defiance. But this human had not threatened. He had not raised his voice. He had simply stated a fact, as calmly as if he were reporting the weather. The Terran command forbids you from crossing this border. Terran felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt uncertain. He sent his report to High Sovereign Orath immediately. The response came within hours. They are bluffing, Orath declared. They are a young species trying to appear strong. Assemble the war fleet. 200 vessels. We will show these humans what happens to those who defy the Dominion. Grand Marshal Sevik received his orders and began gathering the fleet. But unlike his sovereign, Sevik had learned to pay attention to small details. And one detail bothered him greatly. The human admiral had not been afraid. Sevik had seen fear in the eyes of hundreds of enemy commanders. He knew what desperation looked like. He knew what false courage sounded like. Admiral Kang Tejo had shown none of these things. He had spoken like a man who had already made peace with death, like a man who had nothing to lose and everything to defend. Sevik kept these thoughts to himself. The Dominion did not reward doubt. But as his fleet prepared for departure, he could not shake the feeling that something was different about these humans. Something dangerous. Meanwhile, at Border Station Apex, Tejo sent a message to Earth Command. He reported the Valoran demands and his response. The reply came from the Terran Council itself. Your response is approved. Hold the line, Admiral. Earth stands with you. Tejo forwarded the message to every ship in his fleet. 40 vessels. That was all he had. 40 ships to stand against an empire that had conquered half the galaxy. The numbers were impossible. The odds were hopeless. But Tejo had learned something during his long career. Wars were not won by numbers alone. They were won by will, by determination, by the simple refusal to accept defeat. He looked out at his fleet, floating in the darkness. These ships, these crews, these humans. They would not run. They would not beg. They would stand at the border and wait. And if the Valorans wanted to cross, they would have to pay for every inch of space and blood. The red line was drawn. Now the galaxy would learn what it meant. The Valoran war fleet arrived at the border 3 weeks later. 200 warships stretched across the darkness of space like a wall of death. Their hulls gleamed with the colors of the Dominion, gold and purple, the colors of conquest. Each ship was larger than anything in the Terran fleet. Each carried enough weapons to burn a world. Grand Marshal Sevik stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crushing Tide. He looked at the sensor screens showing the Terran fleet positioned on the other side of the invisible line that marked their border. 40 ships, small ships, old ships. He almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Open a channel to the human fleet, Sevik commanded. This is Grand Marshal Sevik of the Valoran Dominion. You are looking at 200 warships. Your fleet is outnumbered 5 to 1. Your technology is inferior. You cannot win this fight. Surrender now, and your people will be spared. Resist, and you will be erased from history. You have 1 hour to respond. The message was sent. Sevik waited. 1 hour passed. There was no response. Sevik frowned. Send the message again. His communications officer obeyed. Another hour passed. Still nothing. The Terran ships did not move. They did not send messages. They simply floated there, in perfect formation, silent as ghosts. Perhaps their communications are damaged, one of Sevik's officers suggested. No, Sevik said slowly. They received our message. They are choosing not to respond. This was strange. Every species Sevik had ever faced had tried to negotiate at this point. They begged for mercy. They offered tribute. They tried to buy time. The humans were doing none of these things. They were simply waiting in silence. Captain Yunhana stood on the bridge of the TSS Horizon, the flagship of the Terran border fleet. She was 42 years old, with sharp eyes and steady hands. She had served under Admiral Tejo for 15 years and trusted him completely. When he gave an order, she followed it without question. His current order was simple. Maintain radio silence. Captain, the Velorans have sent another message. Lieutenant Baek Jiho reported from the tactical station. He was young, only 26. But his mind worked faster than anyone Hana had ever met. He could see patterns in battle that others missed. Ignore it, Hana said. They are demanding our surrender. Let them demand. We have nothing to say to them. Jiho nodded and turned back to his screens. He was analyzing the Veloran fleet, studying their formations and weapons. What he found surprised him. Captain, look at this, he said quietly. The Veloran ships are using combat formations that are over 1,000 years old. They have not changed their tactics in centuries. Hana walked over to look at his screen. Why would they? They have never needed to change. They always win. Exactly, Jiho said. They have never fought an enemy that forced them to adapt. They have forgotten how to fight a real war. Hana allowed herself a small smile. Then we will have to remind them. Across the border, Sevik was growing frustrated. He had expected the humans to break by now. The sight of his massive fleet should have shattered their courage. Instead, the Terran ships sat there like statues, giving nothing away. Send a scout ship, Sevik ordered. Have them approach the border. Let us see how the humans react. A small Veloran vessel moved forward, creeping toward the invisible line. On the horizon, Jiho tracked its progress on his screen. Enemy scout approaching the red line, he reported. 5,000 kilometers, 4,000, 3,000. Hana's hand moved to the weapons control. Her finger hovered over the firing button. Every crew member on the bridge held their breath. 2,000 kilometers. 1,000. 500. The scout ship stopped. It hung there, at the very edge of Terran space, as if testing the water. Then, slowly, it turned and retreated back to the Veloran fleet. Hana lowered her hand. She had been ready to fire. She would have fired without hesitation. But she was glad she did not have to. Not yet. Sevik watched the scout return. His officer reported that the Terran ships had made no move to attack, but their weapons had been ready. They had been waiting, watching. They would have destroyed our scout if it crossed, the officer said. Yes, Sevik agreed. They would have. He thought about what emissary Terran had told him before departing. The human admiral had shown no fear. He had simply stated that crossing the border was forbidden, as if he had every right to give orders to the Dominion. Sevik found this troubling. Fear was a weapon that the Dominion used as effectively as any gun. When species saw their massive fleets, they lost hope. They surrendered because they believed resistance was pointless. But if an enemy did not fear you, that weapon was useless. What do you see when you look at those ships? Sevik asked his second-in-command. The officer studied the screen. I see a small fleet waiting to die. I see something else, Sevik said. I see a fleet that knows it is going to die and has chosen to stay anyway. That is not weakness. That is something else entirely. He requested a private meeting with emissary Terran, who was still aboard a diplomatic vessel nearby. Terran arrived within the hour. The humans are not responding to our demands, Sevik said. They are not negotiating. They are not begging. They are simply silent. Terran nodded slowly. I noticed the same thing when I spoke with their admiral. He did not raise his voice. He did not make threats. He simply told me that we could not cross his border. He said it as if he were stating a law of nature. What do you make of it? Terran was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised Sevik. They are not afraid of us, Grand Marshal. And that is dangerous. An enemy who fears you will make mistakes. They will panic. They will break. But an enemy who has no fear, they will fight to the last breath. They will make you pay for every victory in blood. Sevik considered these words. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years through power and fear. But fear only worked against those who wanted to live at any cost. What happened when you faced an enemy who had already accepted death? He sent a report to High Sovereign Orath, expressing his concerns. The response came quickly. Your concerns are noted and dismissed. The humans are bluffing. They cannot possibly believe they can defeat us. Attack at first light. End this quickly. Sevik read the order twice. He was a soldier. He followed orders. But for the first time in his long career, he felt doubt. Back on the horizon, Captain Hana received word that the Valoran fleet was preparing to move. She called her crew together on the bridge. They will cross the border soon, she said. When they do, we will fight. Some of us will die, perhaps all of us, but we will not run. We will not surrender. We will show this ancient empire that humanity does not bow. Lieutenant Jiho raised his hand. Captain, what is our objective? We cannot destroy their entire fleet. Hana looked at him with calm eyes. Our objective is to make them bleed. To show them that crossing this border has a price. Even if we fall, the next fleet will make them pay more. And the next. And the next. Eventually, they will learn that conquering humanity will cost them everything. The crew was silent. Then, one by one, they nodded. They understood. This was not about winning. This was about something bigger. This was about showing the galaxy what humans were made of. Outside, the stars watched in silence as two fleets faced each other across an invisible line. The Valorans waited for orders to attack. The humans waited for them to come. Neither side spoke. Neither side moved. The weight of silence hung over everything, heavy as a coming storm. On the third day of the standoff, Admiral Kang Taeho sat alone in his quarters aboard Border Station Apex. He held an old photograph in his hands. It showed a city in ruins. Buildings collapsed, smoke rising into a gray sky. The city was Seoul. And the photograph was taken 150 years ago, during the Century of Fire. Taeho's grandfather had been born in that city. He had survived the bombs that fell during the Third Pacific War. He had walked through streets filled with ash and bodies. He had seen humanity at its worst, but he had also seen what came after. Taeho remembered the stories his grandfather told him, how the survivors had crawled out of the shelters and started rebuilding, how they had buried their dead and planted new seeds in poisoned soil, how they had decided, together, that this would never happen again. We learned something in those fires, his grandfather had said. We learned that we could destroy ourselves. And we learned that we did not want to. So we changed. We stopped fighting each other and started building together. It took generations, but we did it. The Treaty of Seoul was signed 70 years after the last bomb fell. All the nations of Earth came together and agreed to form one government. One people. One future. It was the hardest thing humanity had ever done. But they did it because they had no choice. The alternative was extinction. Now, 100 years later, humanity had spread to the stars. They had built colonies on 200 worlds. They had created the Terran Command to protect those worlds. And they had made one promise that every human understood in their bones. Never again will we bow. Taeho put the photograph away and walked to the command center. His officers were monitoring the Valoran fleet, which still sat at the border like a predator waiting to strike. Any movement? Taeho asked. None yet, Admiral, his aide reported. But our intelligence suggests they will attack within the next 12 hours. Taeho nodded. He had expected this. Send a message to all ships. Tell them to rest while they can. Tomorrow will be a long day. Aboard the Horizon, Sergeant No Mina gathered her Marine squad in the ship's cargo bay. They were the ground fighters, the soldiers who would board enemy vessels and fight hand-to-hand if needed. There were 20 of them, young men and women from colonies across Terran space. Mina was 35 years old. She had been a Marine for 15 years and had fought in a dozen small conflicts. She had never faced anything like the Valoran Dominion. None of them had. I am not going to lie to you, she said, standing before her squad. The enemy we face tomorrow is powerful. They have conquered half the galaxy. They have never lost a war. The Marines listened in silence. Some of them looked scared. Some looked determined. Some showed no emotion at all. But I want you to remember something. Mina continued. We are not the Andal. We are not the peaceful species who surrendered because they did not know how to fight. We are humans. Our ancestors survived ice ages and plagues and nuclear fire. They fought each other for 10,000 years before they learned to fight together. That violence is still in our blood. We have simply learned to control it. A young Marine named Kim Do-hun raised his hand. Sergeant, do you really think we can win? Mina looked at him for a long moment. Winning is not the point, Private. Making them bleed is. If we fall, the next generation will fight harder. And the next, we are not fighting to survive tomorrow. We are fighting to prove that humanity will never stop fighting. That is how we win. Not in a single battle, but over centuries. We are patient. We are stubborn. And we do not give up. The squad was silent. Then, slowly, they began to nod. They understood. Meanwhile, on the Valoran flagship, Grand Marshal Sevik was doing something unusual. He was reading. The Dominion had files on every species they had ever conquered. Most of these files were short. A few pages of history, a description of their technology, an assessment of their military strength. The humans were supposed to be the same. A young species, weak technology, easy conquest. But Sevik had requested the full report, all of it, and what he found disturbed him deeply. The humans had a long history of war. Not against other species, against themselves. They had fought countless wars over land, religion, resources, and ideas. They had invented weapons of terrible power and used them without hesitation. They had killed billions of their own kind. Sevik had seen violent species before. The galaxy was full of them. But most violent species destroyed themselves eventually. Their aggression was uncontrolled, chaotic. They burned bright and then burned out. The humans were different. They had come to the edge of destruction many times, but they always pulled back. They always found a way to survive. They did not destroy themselves. Instead, they learned from each war and became stronger. They are not conquerors, Sevik muttered to himself. They are survivors. He read about the Century of Fire. He saw the images of burned cities and poisoned lands. He read about the billions who died and the generations who rebuilt. And he understood something important. These humans knew suffering. They knew what it meant to stand on the edge of extinction and refuse to fall. That knowledge had been passed down through their generations. It was in their blood now, in their very nature. High Sovereign Orath did not see this. He looked at humanity and saw a young, weak species that would break at the first sign of pressure. But Sevik saw something else. He saw a species that had already faced the worst that existence could offer and survived. He wondered if Orath understood what that meant. Back on Border Station Apex, Tejo made a call to Earth. The connection was delayed by the vast distance, but eventually the face of the Terran Council President appeared on screen. Admiral Tejo, President Moon Suji said. She was an older woman with kind eyes and a firm voice. I have received your reports. The situation is serious. It is, Tejo agreed. The Valorans will attack soon. We are outnumbered 5-1. I cannot promise victory. President Moon nodded slowly. I did not ask for victory, Admiral. I asked for you to hold the line. To show the galaxy what humanity stands for. Can you do that? Can you do that? Tejo felt something warm in his chest. Pride. Purpose. Yes, President. We can. Then Earth stands with you. Every colony stands with you. If you fall, we will build a new fleet and send them to the border. And if they fall, we will build another. We will keep sending ships until the Valorans understand that this border will never move. The call ended. Tejo sat in silence for a moment, thinking about the weight of those words. Then he forwarded the President's message to every ship in his fleet. Within minutes, responses came flooding in. Officers and crews from every ship sent the same message. We stand with you. We will not retreat. That night, aboard the Horizon, Captain Hana walked through her ship. She visited every section, spoke to every crew member she could find. She shook hands and offered words of encouragement. She did not promise survival. She did not pretend everything would be fine. Instead, she told them the truth. Tomorrow, we face an empire that has never known defeat. But we are not fighting to defeat them. We are fighting to teach them something they have forgotten. We are fighting to show them what happens when you threaten people who have already walked through fire. We survived our own worst nature. We will survive this too. Lieutenant Jiho found her later on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Captain, do you really believe we can win? He asked. Hana turned to face him. I believe that winning means different things to different people. The Valorans think winning means conquest. We think winning means staying true to who we are. By that measure, we have already won. Everything else is just details. Jiho thought about that for a long time. Then he smiled. I understand, Captain. Tomorrow, we show them what we are made of. Outside the window, the stars burned cold and bright. Somewhere among them, 200 Valoran warships prepared for battle, and 40 human ships waited for them. Silent and unafraid, the echoes of old Earth rang through the darkness, reminding humanity of who they were and what they had survived. They had walked through fire before. They would do it again. The order came at dawn. Grand Marshal Sevik stood on the bridge of the crushing tide and watched as 200 warships of the Valoran Dominion powered up their engines. This was the moment he had been waiting for and dreading in equal measure. High Sovereign Orath had grown impatient. The humans had been given every chance to surrender. They had refused. Now they would learn the price of defiance. All ships, advance, Sevik commanded. Cross the border, destroy the Terran fleet. The Great War Fleet moved forward like a tide of gold and purple. Ships that had conquered 100 worlds, crewed by soldiers who had never known defeat, crossed the invisible line that humanity had drawn in the darkness of space. On Border Station Apex, Admiral Kang Taeho watched the sensor screens turn red. His aide looked at him, waiting for orders. Taeho's face showed nothing. No fear. No anger. Just calm acceptance. They have crossed the red line, Taeho said quietly. Commence Operation Silent Thunder. Captain Yoon Hana received the order aboard the Horizon. She stood from her chair and looked at her crew. These were her people. Her family. In a few minutes, some of them would be dead. All hands to battle stations, she said. Today we show the galaxy who we are. The Terran fleet moved forward to meet the Valoran Armada. 40 ships against 200. It should have been a slaughter. It should have been over in minutes. But the Valorans had made a critical mistake. They had assumed the humans would fight like every other species they had conquered. They were wrong. The Terran ships did not form defensive lines. They did not try to match the Valoran formations. Instead, they scattered into small groups and dove straight into the enemy fleet, like wolves among sheep. What are they doing? Sevik demanded. This is madness. His officers struggled to track the Terran ships. The humans were moving too fast. Too unpredictably. They were not trying to win a traditional battle. They were trying to cause chaos. Lieutenant Baek Jiho sat at his station on the horizon, eyes locked on his screens. His fingers flew across the controls as he analyzed enemy patterns and identified targets. Captain, the Valoran flagship has a weakness in its shield configuration, he reported. There is a gap near the engine section. If we can hit it with a concentrated strike, we can cripple their command ship. Hana nodded. Then that is our target. All power to engines. Take us in. The Horizon accelerated to full speed, dodging enemy fire as it cut through the chaos of battle. Valoran ships tried to intercept, but the Terran cruiser was too fast, too agile. It danced through explosions and debris like a blade cutting through water. Around them, other Terran ships were fighting with the same ferocity. They used tactics the Valorans had never seen before. Small drone ships launched from cargo bays, overwhelming enemy sensors. Terran destroyers rammed into Valoran cruisers, sacrificing themselves to destroy larger targets. One Terran captain steered his burning ship directly into a Valoran carrier, destroying both vessels in a massive explosion. Sevik watched in horror as his fleet began to take losses. 20 ships gone in the first 15 minutes. Then 30. Then 50. The humans were dying too. Their smaller fleet losing vessels at an alarming rate. But they did not retreat. They did not surrender. They just kept fighting, throwing themselves at the Valoran fleet with a fury that bordered on madness. They are insane, Sevik whispered. They cannot win this battle. And yet they fight as if their lives mean nothing. Perhaps they value something more than their lives, his second-in-command replied quietly. On the horizon, alarms blared as the ship took damage. Fires broke out in the lower decks. Crew members rushed to contain them, while others kept fighting. Captain Hana stood at the center of the chaos, calm as a stone in a storm. Lieutenant Jiho, status on the flagship approach? We are 2,000 kilometers out, Captain, but we have enemy ships closing from behind. Hana made a quick decision. Sergeant Mina, prepare your Marines for boarding action. We are going to punch a hole in their defenses and send you in. Sergeant No Mina smiled grimly. Understood, Captain. My team is ready. The Horizon fired everything it had at the Valoran flagship. Missiles streaked through space. Energy beams carved lines of fire across the enemy hull. The crushing tide's shields flickered and sparked as the relentless assault found the weak point Jiho had identified. Their shields are failing, Jiho shouted. Hull breach in the engine section. Hana pointed at the screen. Mina, go! A boarding pod launched from the horizon and flew directly into the breach. Mina and her 20 Marines hit the enemy ship hard, crashing through corridors and bulkheads. They emerged into smoke and chaos, weapons ready. The Valoran soldiers who met them were unprepared. They had fought ground wars before, but always against enemies who feared them. The human Marines showed no fear. They advanced through the ship like a storm, firing and fighting with brutal efficiency. Mina led the charge, her rifle cutting down enemies as she moved. A Valoran soldier lunged at her with a blade. She dodged, grabbed his arm, and threw him into a wall. Another tried to shoot her from behind. Private Kim Do-hoon intercepted him, taking the shot himself before killing the attacker with his last breath. Mina did not have time to mourn. She pressed forward. Her objective was the engine room. If they could destroy it, the Valoran flagship would be crippled. Back in space, the battle raged on. The Terran fleet had lost 15 ships. The Valorans had lost 60. It was not a victory for humanity, but it was something the Dominion had never experienced: true resistance. Grand Marshal Sevik felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. Not of death, but of uncertainty. He had always known the outcome of battles before they began. The Dominion always won. But today, watching his ships burn and his soldiers fall to creatures half his age, he did not know how this would end. Grand Marshal, enemy Marines have boarded the ship, an officer screamed. They are approaching the engine room. Sevik grabbed a weapon from a fallen guard. Send all available troops to stop them. I will not lose this ship to animals. Deep in the crushing tide, Mina and her surviving Marines reached the engine room. There were only 8 of them left. 8 humans against the heart of the Valoran flagship. Set the charges, Mina ordered. We blow this room. We cripple the whole ship. Her Marines worked fast, placing explosives on critical systems. Valoran reinforcements arrived, flooding into the room. A firefight erupted. Marines fell. Enemies fell. Blood and smoke filled the air. Mina took a hit to her shoulder but kept fighting. She shot 2 more Valorans and planted the final charge herself. Then she looked at the 3 Marines still standing. Get to the escape pods, she said. I will hold them. Sergeant, one of them started. That is an order. Go. They went. Mina turned to face the oncoming enemy. She had 1 magazine left and a corridor full of targets. She smiled. Come on then, she said. Let us see who runs out of soldiers first. Outside, the Horizon pulled away from the flagship just as the charges detonated. A massive explosion tore through the crushing Tide's engine section, killing its power and leaving it drifting in space. Grand Marshal Sevik was thrown from his feet as darkness swept across his bridge. The Velaran fleet, seeing their command ship fall silent, began to waver. Ships that had never retreated started pulling back. The humans, battered and bloody, pressed their advantage. They chased the retreating enemy, firing until the last Valoran vessel crossed back over the red line. Then they stopped. They did not pursue. They simply watched as the Dominion fleet limped away into the darkness. Captain Hana stood on the bridge of the Horizon, looking at what remained of her fleet. 25 ships destroyed, thousands dead. But they had held the line. They had stopped the unstoppable. She opened a channel to Admiral Tejo. "Admiral, the enemy has retreated. The border is secure." Tejo's voice came back, tired but steady. "Well done, Captain. Well done to everyone." Among the debris, a single escape pod drifted. Inside, Sergeant Mina floated unconscious, her wounds bleeding slowly. She had survived the explosion. Barely. Her 3 Marines found her pod 20 minutes later and brought her home. The Battle of the Red Line was over. The Terran command had paid a terrible price. But they had proven something to the galaxy. Humanity could not be conquered easily. Humanity would not bow. And somewhere in the wreckage, Grand Marshal Sevik sent a message to High Sovereign Oreth. They do not fight to win. They fight to make victory meaningless. I advise caution. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. The Valoran Dominion, the undefeated empire that had ruled for 10,000 years, had been stopped. Not destroyed. Not conquered, simply stopped. By a species that had only been among the stars for 80 years. On 100 worlds, beings of every shape and color listened to the reports in stunned silence. The Dominion had always seemed invincible. To see them retreat, their mighty flagship crippled, their war fleet broken, changed something in the hearts of those who had lived in fear for so long. Perhaps the Dominion could be challenged. Perhaps there was hope after all. At Border Station Apex, the battered Terran fleet limped home, ships with holes in their hulls, ships with half their crews dead, ships that barely had enough power to maintain life support. They came home as heroes, though none of them felt like heroes. They felt tired, sad, grateful to be alive. Captain Yoon Hana stood on the observation deck of the Horizon and watched the station grow larger through the window. Crowds of people had gathered on the docking platforms, civilians and soldiers, families waiting for loved ones who might never return. When the first ships docked, the cheering began. Hana did not feel like cheering. She was thinking about the crew members she had lost. 17 from her ship alone. 17 names she would have to add to the memorial wall. 17 letters she would have to write to families who would never see their children again. But she also knew that their deaths had meant something. They had held the line. They had shown the galaxy that humanity would not break. Lieutenant Baek Jiho found her an hour later, still standing at the window. "Captain, Admiral Tejo wants to see you," he said. Hana nodded and followed him to the command center. Tejo was there, looking as tired as she felt. But there was something in his eyes that had not been there before. Peace. Perhaps. Or satisfaction. "Captain Hana," Tejo said, "you performed exceptionally. Your attack on the enemy flagship turned the tide of battle." "Thank you, Admiral. But the credit belongs to Lieutenant Jiho for finding the weakness, and to Sergeant Mina and her Marines for exploiting it." Tejo smiled. "Speaking of Sergeant Mina, I have good news. She will survive. Her wounds were severe, but the doctors say she will make a full recovery." Hana felt a weight lift from her chest. Mina had been recovered from her escape pod in critical condition. She had been in surgery for 12 hours. To hear that she would live was the best news Hana had received in days. "I would like to recommend her for the Medal of Valor," Hana said. "Already done," Tejo replied. "Along with citations for every Marine who boarded the enemy flagship. They will be remembered." End quote. Far away, on the Valoran homeworld, High Sovereign Orath sat on his throne of cold stone and listened to Grand Marshal Sevik's report. His face showed no expression, but his hands gripped the arms of his throne with enough force to crack the ancient rock. You are telling me that we lost 60 warships to a fleet 1/5 our size? Orath's voice was quiet. Which made it more dangerous. Yes, my sovereign, Sevik replied. He had expected anger. He had expected execution. Instead, Orath was simply cold. The humans fought in ways we have never seen. They did not try to survive. They tried to take as many of our ships with them as possible. Our tactics were not designed for such an enemy. Our tactics have crushed 47 species. Yes, my sovereign. But those species wanted to live. The humans seemed willing to die, as long as they could make us bleed. Our soldiers do not know how to fight such an enemy. Orath was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke words that shocked everyone in the throne room. Withdraw from the border. Pull our fleet back to the Andal sector. We will not engage the humans again until we understand them better. Sevik bowed low. As you command, my sovereign. As he left the throne room, Sevik allowed himself a small breath of relief. He had expected to die today. Instead, Orath had chosen caution. Perhaps the High Sovereign was not as blind as Sevik had feared. In the days that followed, emissary Terran was sent back to the border under a flag of truce. He met with a Terran diplomat in a neutral station far from any fleet. The Dominion wishes to discuss terms, Terran said. His voice was careful, measured. Not surrender, but an understanding. The Terran diplomat was a young woman named Park Unji. She had grown up on a colony world and had never seen Earth, but she carried herself with the same quiet confidence that all humans seem to have. What kind of understanding? She asked. The red line, Terran said. We will recognize it as permanent. Valoran ships will not cross into Terran space. In exchange, we ask only that Terran ships do not cross into ours. Unji considered this carefully. That sounds like a border agreement. Call it what you wish. The High Sovereign simply wants peace. No, Unji said. He wants time. Time to study us. Time to find our weaknesses. We both know this. Terran did not deny it. Perhaps. But would you not do the same? We are ancient enemies now. Your kind and mine. The question is, whether we will fight again tomorrow, or wait for a better day. Unji smiled. Tell your sovereign that we accept his offer. The red line is permanent. We will not cross it, and neither will you. But also tell him this. If your ships ever cross that line again, we will not stop until we reach your homeworld. That is not a threat, it is a promise. Terran bowed his head. I will deliver your message. 1 week later, Admiral Kang Teho stood before the assembled crews of the border fleet. They had gathered on the main platform of Border Station Apex, thousands of men and women who had faced death and survived. Behind them, the repaired and rebuilt ships of the Terran fleet floated in silent formation. Teho looked at them for a long moment. Then he spoke. 1 month ago, an ancient empire told us to surrender our homes and our freedom. They believed we would kneel because we were young and weak. They were wrong. The crowd listened in silence. We did not win because we are stronger than them. We are not. We did not win because we have better weapons. We do not. We won because we made a choice. We chose to stand at the border and say no. We chose to fight for something bigger than our own lives. We chose to show the galaxy that humanity does not bow. Teho paused, letting the words sink in. Many of our brothers and sisters died in that battle. We will remember them. We will honor them. And we will make sure that their sacrifice was not in vain. The red line is permanent now. The Valorans will not cross it again. But we must stay vigilant. We must stay strong. Because there will be other empires, other threats, other lines we must draw. And when those moments come, I know that you will stand firm. Because that is who we are. That is what we are made of. He raised his hand in salute. For Earth, for humanity, for those who stood and did not fall. The crowd erupted in cheers. Soldiers embraced each other. Some wept. The weight of what they had survived finally hit them all at once. In the medical bay, Sergeant Nomina watched the speech on a screen beside her bed. Her arm was in a healing brace, and her ribs were wrapped tight. But she was smiling. Private Kim Do-hun had died saving her life. She would make sure he was never forgotten. Captain Hana visited her later that day. "How do you feel, Sergeant?" "Alive, Captain." "That is more than I expected." Hana sat beside her bed. "I want you to know that Earth Command has approved the Medal of Valor for you and your entire squad, including those who did not come back." Mina's eyes grew wet, but she did not cry. "Thank you, Captain. That means more than I can say." Outside the station, the stars burned cold and bright. Somewhere out there, the Velaran Dominion licked its wounds and plotted its next move. But they had learned a lesson they would never forget. The red line was real. It was permanent. And any who tried to cross it would pay a price in blood. Months later, ships from other species began arriving at Terran space. Small delegations at first. Ambassadors from worlds that had been conquered by the Dominion or threatened by their expansion. They came to see the humans who had done the impossible. They found a young species that had only known the stars for 80 years. A species that had nearly destroyed itself before learning to work together. A species that had looked at the most powerful empire in the galaxy and said no. Lieutenant Baek Jiho stood at the observation deck of the horizon, watching the diplomatic vessels arrive. He thought about everything that had happened. The battle. The deaths. The victory that did not feel like victory. He pulled up a star map on his personal display. The red line glowed bright. A boundary that would never move. Beyond it, the galaxy waited. Countless stars. Countless worlds. Countless challenges yet to come. But humanity was ready. They had always been ready. Because that was what it meant to be human. To face the darkness and refuse to look away. To stand at the edge of extinction and choose to fight anyway. The red line held, and the galaxy watched in wonder.